Okay, time for a new video, and whether you are somebody new to my channel or you are returning to my channel to watch this video, it is greatly appreciated. As always, I'm filming this video in one go, so if I stumble over my words moving forwards, apologies about that, and also apologies if the quality of this video is fairly poor as well. If there's any lag, anything like that at all, sadly it can't be helped, and hopefully it's not too much of an issue for you. This is yet another Eurovision related video here on my channel, and the second part of a little series that I'm doing here on my channel, in which I go through all of the countries taking part in the Eurovision Song Contest, and I tell you what I'd like to see/hear from them at the 2025 edition of the competition, which will take place next May in either Basel or Geneva in Switzerland. As always, you're welcome to let me know your thoughts on anything I discuss in today's video by leaving a comment down below. And as always, there are links in the description to my other social media pages. Check them out if you so wish. What I have in front of me is a list of all of the nations that have ever participated in the ESC, and I am going through them one by one, excluding those nations that are considered not active, such as Hungary and Monaco that I can see in front of me. But I'm going through everybody else. I also have my joint Instagram page loaded up as well, because last year I did wish list posts involving various names that I'd like to see be involved for certain countries at some point, so I'll be going through those as and when moving forwards. Last time I finished with Germany, and now I am continuing with Greece, and I feel as though I'm going to sound like a bit of a broken record once again in this video, because for some countries I really don't have a huge amount to say. I'm not too fussed about what type of musician it's going to be, whether they're established or whether they're a newcomer, male, female, non-binary band. I'm not terribly fussed about that either. I'm not terribly fussed about the genre. I wasn't a huge fan of this year's Greek entry by Marina Sati. I like it more than I did at the time, let's put it that way. I think what was particularly impressive for me was the confidence in which it was performed, and also the way in which it was shot. Pretty much all one camera shot, the camera just panning around Marina and her troupe of dancers for 3 minutes. I wasn't too sure about that at first, and to be honest, watching the performance in the final and indeed the semi-final, I still wasn't sure about it, but there's no doubt about it, it stood out because of the way it was presented. And also you had that on-screen Instagram thing going on as well. You'll know what I'm on about, I'm sure you remember it very well. Something like that again, where the performance really feels very different from anything else around it. I'm all for that. I think that's something you obviously have to try and do at Eurovision. Make your song stand out as much as it possibly can, but in a way where it doesn't feel too over the top or forced, because sometimes we do get performances like that. Another performer who is very confident on stage, with all due respect to Victor Vernicos in Liverpool last year. Yes, he was very young, but the song wasn't good enough, and his live performance was not remotely strong enough, and it was no surprise to anybody that Greece didn't go through. This year was a huge improvement, a massive step in the right direction, and Greece now have to push on and get an even better result next year. Another song entirely in Greek, I'm all for it. Moving on to Iceland, skipping Hungary, who aren't currently involved. I should say with the joint Instagram page, I've only done wishlist posts for countries that usually have a national final, and Iceland is one such example. They have Söngvakeppnin. We have 2 semi-finals and the grand final. The grand final involves 5 songs, that's it, not much to it really. One of those acts is a wildcard pick, somebody who didn't originally go through from one of the 2 semi-finals, and we also have a super final. And there was controversy earlier in the year with Söngvakeppnin because you had Bashar with Wild West, and he seemed to be a bit of a shoo-in for reasons that maybe aren't necessarily to do with the music, admittedly, but it seemed as though he was going to be a shoo-in, and I expected him to win. And I was sitting right here in this seat earlier in the year, refreshing the page, waiting for the result to come in. Or was I actually watching some sort of live stream? I don't think I was just refreshing the page, and I was open-mouthed when he didn't win, and Hera Björk came out on top instead. I don't think anybody saw that coming. I think people in Iceland didn't necessarily see it coming, but there we are. And of course, then there was this big debate about how the voting was rigged, or people's votes weren't going through for Wild West, and there was talk about Iceland withdrawing. There was much controversy, and then it all died down, because of course it did, and then Iceland didn't really do very good at the competition in Malmö at all. Last in the first semi-final with, I think, 3 points, was it? Pretty darn rubbish. That's 2 NQs in a row now for Iceland. Now, I don't even know if they're going to be involved next year. I certainly hope so, because you've got to move on from the controversy that's gone before. Put it behind you, move on, try and get yourself into the final in 2025. But I wouldn't be surprised if there's more talk about withdrawal moving forwards. I hope that the quality is fairly strong. I can see Bashar being involved again, and if indeed he is involved again, you may as well put money on him winning the whole national final, because I really can see that happening. I think a lot of people in Iceland will want him to get his revenge, for want of a better word, and then he'll go to Eurovision and probably win that as well. I wasn't a huge fan of Wild West, but there's no doubt about it, it definitely gave the national selection a bit of a different flavour, which I'm all for. And we have had quite varied stuff from Iceland over the past few years. Think About Things, Hatrithmun Sigra, we've had Með Hækkandi Sól, all of these songs that do feel quite different from each other. It's not as though Iceland are doing the same thing again and again and again. This year's effort, Scared of Heights, just felt monumentally dated. And Herbjörg, she's great, not a bad vocalist at all, but the song just wasn't at all strong enough. And I can't imagine many people in Iceland were really getting behind their own act this time around. Now, in terms of the wish list, Iceland is full to the brim with great musicians. I listen to Icelandic music fairly regularly. I'm always looking up new Icelandic names. So on the wish list post, we have Katla, who finished 5th last in the 2022 national selection, and she, I believe, has teamed up with Elin Hall, who was involved in Songvakeppnin under the name Elin Sif years ago with a great acoustic ballad called Dance Slow, I think it was. Well worth checking it out. Anyway, the two of them have teamed up recently, and I think they're making music together now, but don't quote me on that. That could be a double act to watch moving forwards. We've also got Ásgeir, great male singer. Kvikindi, they've got a few very interesting songs, quite up-tempo dance type stuff. Briette, who has a brilliant song called Cold Feet, which I recommend. Vok, V-O-K. We also have, is it Lave? I think that's how you pronounce it. Laufey. Very interesting musician, has had quite a bit of success in mainland Europe and America so far in their career, and I think they've released 2 albums, something like that. Don't quote me on this. But they're a really, really rising star. A very promising act indeed, so it's worth keeping an eye on them. I don't think they do Songvakeppnin at all, though. And then you've also got Gudrun, G-D-R-N, who is a really successful Icelandic musician, won a whole bunch of awards, and they performed a cover of 2003, the 2003 Icelandic entry, Open Your Heart. They performed that at Songvakeppnin a few years ago, I think it was. Gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. So I am all for them maybe being involved in Songvakeppnin sooner rather than later. I just hope that the national final is really strong. There are so many great Icelandic musicians, and I hope many of them are involved in the selection next year if Iceland decide to take part, which they should, or there will be slappings, I tell you. Anyway, we move on to Ireland. Well, there'll be more focus on Ireland next year because they did so well this year with Bambi Thug, Doomsday Blue. I was rooting for Go to Ban by Ailsa. The live performance was all over the damn place, though, to be honest with you. She sort of went for a throwback Avril Lavigne type look. I'm not sure it totally came together very well. I'd like to see her try again, though, because it was a song in Irish, predominantly, and it felt so original. But Doomsday Blue also felt very original, and I wasn't a huge fan of it at first, but then that performance was really quite something. And that's how you take what you've already got and elevate it for the Eurovision stage. It was a great example of how to do it, and it was so impressive, and I do like the song a lot more now, absolutely. As for what I hope for next year, maybe take another bit of a risk. Do not go back to square one. Do not go back to the likes of Wild Youth, because my God, that is the last thing any damn country needs at Eurovision. We've heard it all before. It's time for fresh stuff left, right and centre. And I do think now Ireland, having sent somebody like Bambi Thug to Eurovision, they are now going to be more willing, perhaps in a way that they weren't before, to send different types of musicians and different types of songs, because they will be aware of how well they can do at the contest. First things first, I'm going to say about Ireland what I said about Czechia in my previous video. That national final system's just no good. Have it in a much better venue. Bigger crowd, better atmosphere, promote it more. More songs? Perhaps. Songs in Irish? Absolutely. In terms of the wishlist post, we've got Dermot Kennedy, Connolly, who was the runner-up last year with Midnight Summer Night. Need to check if she's released any new music since. Inhaler, Fontaines DC, Gavin James, The Coronas, Kian Ducrot, which I'm sure I'm mispronouncing, and Amy, who was the runner-up in 2013, I believe it was, with Crashing Down. Lovely song, lovely ballad. So any of them would be much appreciated, although I do think some of them are arguably a bit too famous to do it now. Not that that should be an issue when it comes to Eurovision. But yes, Ireland, I think it's time to push on. You know, goodbye Jedward, goodbye Wild Youth, and hello something completely original again next year, possibly in the Irish language. Next is Israel. Well, I don't really have too much to say about Israel. We know that they're going to use their national selection again, Rising Star. I hope for something that has zero political connotations. I hope for somebody with a cracking voice, which we did have this year, to be fair. And I hope for just a really fine song, something a bit more up-tempo than Hurricane. However, what I expect we'll get is something not a million miles away from what we had this year, and lots of fuss behind the scenes about the delegation, probably riling up other delegations. I imagine there will be more furore and controversy moving forwards. Now, I said on my channel that I thought Israel shouldn't have taken part this year because it was in the best interests of everybody if they sat it out, and lo and behold they took part, did really well, but there was so much dismay behind the scenes, and it made Eurovision a fairly unpleasant experience for almost everybody involved. Fans, artists, delegations, the crew perhaps as well, everybody. It was just a real shite show. Expect more of the same next year. Otherwise, I don't really have much to say. I have no wishlist post. Moving on to Italy. Oh boy, Sanremo, which very recently was put back a week. It's taking place in mid-February next year. We know that we're going to get quality every damn way you look. Loads of songs. The format of Sanremo is tinkered with every year, which is fine. If anything, I don't mind the way that we end up with a winner, where it's like public votes, jury votes, demoscopic poll, press poll, internet poll, orchestra have their say, at least they have had in the past. All of these different methods to try and come up with a winner over the course of several evenings. Now, I know that Sanremo is not strictly speaking a national final, but it may as well be, because the winner usually goes to Eurovision itself. I have no concerns whatsoever. This is the only country, when it comes to Eurovision, where I am not worried about what they're going to do, because Italy aren't stupid. They usually send a really, really good song. They don't really have much in the way of jokey entries in Sanremo. You know, maybe one or two every year, but they never really, really do that well. Maybe in the past, not so much these days, it seems. The vocals from everybody are usually bang on the money. Everything sounds great with the orchestra, and it's just great. It's absolutely great. The audience sitting there in their best suits, stony-faced, watching the performances, and then clapping at the end of each one. And after 2 hours, 3 artists have performed, and you know that you're not getting any bedtime that night. You know what I mean? It's so interesting to really read about and watch clips of, and just sort of let it wash over you as a non-Italian. Anyway, in terms of artists that I'd like to see involved, so many great names. We have Mara Satei, who's been involved before in 2023. The Colours, who've been involved twice before, including this year. Blanca, who represented Poland in Liverpool last year. She was in their music video, and they're a really big deal in Italy. Alessandra Amoroso, Casa di Lego, who has blue hair, at least they do in this picture. La Rappresentante di Lista. I know a lot of people are big fans of them. They had Ciao Ciao a few years ago. I can see them coming back sooner rather than later. Angelina Mango was on the wish list, and lo and behold, she went to Eurovision. So I don't think she'll be involved again, that's for sure. Elodie, who's had a couple of cracking songs in the past. Maybe it's time for her to try again. Pinguini Tattici Nucleari, they've been involved. Were they involved this year? Can't quite remember, but they were third in 2020 with Ringo Starr. Francesca Michelin, who I just love. I've followed her career ever since she did Eurovision in 2016. She didn't win Sanremo. She finished second and went to Eurovision because Stadio decided not to do it. Her song at the time was great. She's released so many great songs since. Bolivia is a personal favourite of mine. Then she came back into Sanremo with Fedez and finished second again. And she's also been a conductor. So, I mean, she's just dipping her toes into lots of different things. I think she's also I think she presents the Italian X Factor, actually. Don't quote me on that. But she's fantastic. Great voice. I'd love to see her win Sanremo and then maybe do Eurovision again. Madame, who I think absolutely will be back. Didn't she co-write La Noia? I think she did. So it's time for Madame to try again. Diodato, I think, will come back at some point too. And of course, the legend that is Annalisa. 9th, 4th, 11th, 3rd, 7th, and then was it 3rd this year? That's a pretty good track record. At some point this woman has to win Sanremo. She's too good not to. And of course Italians have to really be on board with her song, and then she has to say yes to doing Eurovision. But I just think she'd be such a fantastic representative. Her music that she releases and does outside of Sanremo is actually a little bit different from what we get from her when the Sanremo Music Festival takes place. Her music, I would say, is a lot more pop-oriented, a little bit more in the vein of Sinceramente, which is what we did have at Sanremo this year. That song would have done arguably better than La Noia in Malmö, if you ask me. She is the dream Italian representative, so we'll see what happens moving forwards. I don't expect her to try again so soon, though. Anyway, after Italy, my god, this is a long rambling video already, it's Latvia. There was talk about Latvia withdrawing. What the hell are you talking about? Fools! You've just had your best results in years. Oh, let's give it a miss in 2025. What the hell are you talking about? Absolutely not. I believe this was debated in the Latvian parliament, and quite rightly they said, no, we are going to take part, and a few days ago they confirmed that Supernova will be back in 2025. So, happy days. I'm thrilled for Latvia. You know, they were rank outsiders coming into this year's contest, qualified, and then did all right in the jury vote and the public vote in the final. So, you know, happy days all round. Get the champagne out. As for what I'd like to see in here next year from Latvia, I don't know. Sometimes you do get a real gem in the Latvian selection, but you also get a lot of not very good stuff. I imagine there will be a semi-final and then the final. I imagine there will be a jury vote and public vote. I'm not terribly fussed about the performer or the type of song. We've had a ballad in Hollow this year, so I think next year something a lot more up-tempo, perhaps in the Latvian language. If we take a look at the wish list, Dons was on there, and lo and behold, he came back and did the business. Kato, or Kato, Elisabetta Gale, who was knocked out early in 2020, and Raum, who was 9th in 2022 and 6th in 2023. There's also Vestules, who were the runners-up behind Dons in Supernova earlier this year. What a little gem that song was. I think they're only 16 or 17. Don't quote me on that. They're very young. And that song grew on me like you wouldn't believe. I really grew to appreciate it well after Supernova took place. So they should come back. And we'll see what happens. But yeah, Latvia, I'm not too concerned. I mean, the aim is obviously to qualify again next year. I can see Aminata being involved somewhere, but we move on to their geographical neighbours, Lithuania. Lithuania are pushing hard for that maiden victory. It may come sooner rather than later. The national final in the past has been exceptionally long-winded. I think they've streamlined it a bit more over the past few years. Keep it that way. We don't need shows all through January and February, even going back to December. No. Only a few shows. There are good songs in the national selection every year, but like with Latvia, there's also a lot of not great material. So I don't know what you can really do about that unless you completely condense down the national selection and have just one show with 6 songs in it. You know, do a Song Beketnin style thing. I don't know. Anyway, Lithuania did well this year, but maybe not quite as well as we anticipated. I think it was mid-table in the end. I was really expecting well over 100 points in the public half of the results, and that never happened. Now, in terms of the wish list, Petunia, who had a great song in 2023, Love of My Life. Gabrielius Vagelis, who's tried numerous times. I can see him coming back. Jessica Shai is a big star in Lithuania. Maybe she should give it a go. Beatrice, or Beatrick, who was 3rd in 2023 with Like a Movie. That didn't feel like the most original song. It was sort of pop rock in vein. It felt like a sort of throwback number to me, but I really, really enjoyed it, and I thought that she nailed the live performances. So I'd love to see her try. Jan, or G-Jan, who I've been aware of since she burst onto the scene. I can't remember the name of the song, but in the music video, I think she's on a roof, and then at the end, she stuffs her face full of cake. Not Afraid, that's the name of the song. There you go, check it out. She stuffs her face full of cake. And she's been making music for a long, long time, and she's not been involved in the national selection, so maybe it is now time. Rooteloop had a couple of good songs. Paulina Paukštaitė, who finished 5th in 2023, and I've never been able to pronounce her name properly, but Eile Jurgaitė, who is a beautiful woman, and finished 3rd at Junior Eurovision in 2008 with Laiminga Diena Woho Woho. That was a great live performance way back in the day. And she's still making music. I think she was on The Voice in Lithuania, don't quote me on that. I think she's a bit of an influencer type figure now. But look, she's right there, and I would definitely be campaigning for her to be involved in the Lithuanian selection. I'd like a song in Lithuanian. Something, again, that feels quite original and fresh. I say this for every country because it's so true. That's what we want as Eurovision fans. You know, when the Roop came along, they've had some very original sounding songs, I would say, in the Lithuanian selection. More of the same. Next up is Luxembourg. Well, I don't think much needs to change. You know, we weren't really sure what we were going to get from Luxembourg. Their last entry was in 1993, my apologies. So we weren't really sure what we were going to get this year. The national final, the quality wasn't amazing. I think the most disappointing thing was it was so blatantly obvious that some of these songs were meant for other national finals. Child had a song, is that how you pronounce it? Child. He had a song called Hold On, I believe it was. That was straight out of the rejected Melfest pile, or the rejected DMGP pile, or the rejected MVP file, or whatever you want to call it. It just sounded so utterly basic, and clearly not a song that was originally intended for the Luxembourg selection. So I do think moving forwards over the next few months, really try and use homegrown songwriters if you can, homegrown talent, because it's just so disappointing when you get songs that are clearly plucked from somewhere else. I think Malta have done this a few times in the past as well. It's just disappointing to see. I'm not hugely against it, it's just disappointing. On the Luxembourg wish list, we had Geza, or Getza, Child, who was involved, Francis of Delirium, a male-female duo, and Luca Closer, who's had quite a bit of success as well. I'm not too fussed. A song in the Luxembourg language would be quite nice. The quality has to be a lot stronger. There needs to be more diversity, and also less Scandinavian songwriters. Hate to say it, but I think it's absolutely true. Next up is Malta. For some reason, I didn't do a Malta wish list. I think that's because they'd already announced their participants before I was able to get the wish list done in time. Anyway, MESC is a stinking, festering pile of mush half the time. Again, the format has been tinkered with so many times. Streamline it. I cannot believe this is a country that a few years ago we had Chameleon from this damn country, and that was a slice of fried gold. And then Destiny came along with All of My Love, and then she had Je Me Casse, and then Malta were like, we've got a good thing going. Let's go right back to square one. Now, I still don't know why this happened. I imagine it was because of money. But MESC, it's never been that great, is it really? We get so many returning names, half of the songs are very lukewarm, completely uninspired, and then we get a song that goes to Eurovision. And the problem with Malta at Eurovision is that the public are never truly on board with them. So many years now, the public mark is a big fat disappointment. Sarah Bonici, last in the sole public vote second semi-final in Malmö. What a load of crap. That performance was not last place worthy. Absolutely not. So it was so disappointing to see. Now, in terms of artists I'd like to see come back, now you'll have to bear with me here. I'm going to look at the last few Maltese selections. I mean, people who've done Eurovision. I wouldn't mind Emma Muscat trying again. I wouldn't mind Fabrizio Faniello trying again. Claudia Faniello trying again. Maybe they'll come back as a duo. That's certainly possible. Christabel, I can see her coming back. Chiara might try again at some point. Yes. I'd love to see Michaela come back as well. She did a song with Ira Losco a few years ago called Cannonball, which was really good. So let's have a look. Malta 20... Oh, that was an internal selection, was it? Oh, yes, of course it was. 2023, who was involved? I've got to try and remember... Brooke Borg absolutely ought to represent Malta at some point. Aidan really ought to be representing Malta at some point. Who else have we got here? Hayley, she had TikTok last year. Who else have we got? Maxine Patch. Oh, yeah. Fantastic. I'd love to see her do it. Ryan Hilly, I can see him doing it at some point, but he needs to stop borrowing songs from elsewhere. Yes. Keep Matt Black away. Thank you very much. And then this year, just bear with me, dear viewers. Denise, who had Mara, that one. That wasn't bad. Erba, girl group, new on the scene with Sirena, that was pretty good. Hayley Atsopadi, that was good. What else have we got here? Yes. Ryan Hilly again. Yeah. Oh man, there's so much bang average material. I can see Matt Black doing it though. I really can. And I can see Aidan coming back and maybe doing it as well. In terms of what I'd like to hear, maybe a rock song. Again, I sound like a broken record, but a lot of countries could do with sending something like that. Take that gamble, see if it pays off. A song in Maltese, it is high time. And something that just feels very competitive. It's got to be a song that has broad sort of radio universal appeal, because that is one way to get the public on board, I'm afraid to say it. It might feel completely uninspired, but it might just be enough to get you into the final. I look at Cyprus this year. That could easily have been Malta's entry, and that would have qualified for Malta, would it not? I don't know. Let's move on to Moldova. How long is this video? Okay, I'll do a few more countries. Moldova, well, their national final, it's very sloppy, isn't it? It's very sloppy. There's that audition round which takes place in a small studio somewhere in the country. We have the same names. You've got that old guy who comes back every year and mumbles his way through something for 3 minutes. You've got the guy who sings about underage girls. It's a right mess. It's a right mess. But Moldova, you know, they are just absolute kings of turning things around. When you think a song is half-assed, they will shine it like a diamond and stick it on that Eurovision stage, and it's an enjoyable 3 minutes. Look at what Stop Stub did in Turin a few years ago. Look at what Doridos did in Lisbon a few years ago. They are just champions at this. Now, admittedly, Moldova did not qualify this year. So, you know, the aim is to bounce back with something that feels pretty damn top-notch. next year, we had Natalia Barbu. Now, here's something that really needs to change, in my opinion. Natalia Barbu this year, she'd done Eurovision before. Pasha Parfeni last year, he'd done Eurovision before. Stop Shistub in 2022 had done Eurovision twice before. And in 2021, we had Natalia Gordienko. She'd done Eurovision before. It is time for somebody brand spanking new for Moldova. So that is what I'm hoping for. But you know as well as I do that it's probably going to be another returning name, probably somebody like Geta Berlaciu or something like that. Now, on the wishlist post, I don't think there's many names here. We have Diana Breshkan, who's been involved many times, Irina Rimes, or Rimes, my apologies, Valeria Stoica, and Valeria Pasha, who tied for first place in the Moldovan selection earlier this year with Natalia Barbu, and for some reason, which I don't think has ever been explained, Natalia Barbu won it, despite the fact there was no tie-break situation. I think it was jury precedence, but I don't believe any rule for tie-breaks was stipulated in the rules for the national final. Anyway, I don't know. I just think Moldova make it up as they go along. But anyway, you know, arguably Valeria Pasha would have done better in Malmö this year. But we move on to the Netherlands. Will they be involved next year? Yes, they damn well should be, or again, slappings like you wouldn't believe. You've got to put it behind you, for crying out loud. This whole shebang with Joost Klein and the controversy. Look, here's my 2 cents. Not that anybody gives a damn. I don't know what happened behind closed doors. None of us do. If Joost Klein slapped some woman or approached some woman in an aggressive manner, if he did something completely indefensible, then it's indefensible. And to be honest, you know, he deserves the book thrown at him. But if it was something that feels very light and the punishment that he received, which was disqualification, seems very harsh, then I can absolutely understand the anger and frustration and fury from a lot of Dutch fans, and indeed Joost Klein fans in general. I really, really get it. It was such a shite show because it was one day before the final, and everything was up in the air, and then everybody was kicking off about Israel and what have you. It just felt like a right sloppy mess. It really did. Now, if the Netherlands withdraw, so be it. I can understand why. But if anything, you should be galvanised, and you should say next year we're coming back and we mean business once again. I can see Joost Klein doing it again. I think he said that he wouldn't mind doing it again. So if he's available and he wants to do it, give him a call. If he's cleared of all of these charges or whatever it is, why not just pick him again and go for the win again? Europapa was such a huge hit, not just in the Netherlands but elsewhere too. And I mean, his career is just going to go from strength to strength, in all honesty, irrespective of all of this stuff that supposedly happened behind the scenes the day before the grand final in Malmö. Now, if it's not Joost Klein, I actually bookmarked 2 musicians. One is Maan. Oh, apologies if there's any lag there, dear viewers. Maan is her name, and she's been around for quite a while. Just bear with me, I'm always... Here we are. Kensington, who I think are still together, but the lead singer cleared off a while back. They have so many great songs. Streets is fantastic, that was released years ago, but they are a great band, sort of ready-made arena music, so I'd like to see them do it. Within Temptation, that would be such a great act to have at Eurovision. They would absolutely challenge for the win, heavens above. My God, this sort of like symphonic metal stuff, fantastic. Sinead is a great song by them. But here we are, Maren de Steenwinkel, who is 27 from Utrecht. She was on The Voice of Holland. She won it several years ago, and she's had, you know, a lot of hits in the Netherlands. Stiekem, Blijven Slapen, which I'm surely mispronouncing. Ze hult maar ze lacht. Yes, dredge up that phlegm in my throat. Anyway, yeah, she's fantastic. I've heard quite a bit of her music, so I think she should be in contention, and if she's not, why not? And then also, here's a bit of a left field choice, perhaps. Emma Koch, who is 16 from Maastricht. She won The Voice Kids, and there's this video that I've seen on my recommended page on YouTube a few times now, and she's performing with Andre Rieu, and that's had millions and millions of views, and people have reacted to her incredible voice. She is a star in the making. So if you want to do something maybe a little bit risky, 16-year-old Emma Koch, who will be 17 by next May, maybe that's somebody to take a look at. Maybe. Otherwise, the names I've just mentioned, and of course, Joost Klein himself. A song in Dutch would be lovely, something in the mould of De Diepte would be lovely, but really, I'm not too fussed. Quality is what we want, and what we want, at least what I want, is the Netherlands involved next year. Moving on to Norway. I might do Norway and Poland and then leave it there for today. Norway, they're sticking with MGP, of course. It's not bad. Like with Ace de Laul and like with maybe Songbekettning to some extent as well, in my personal opinion, the quality is not quite as good as it once was, but it's still not bad. I'd like a song in Norwegian. We had that this year, and sadly, Gorta fell flat on their face. Last place was outrageous. I don't think anybody saw that coming. It was so bizarre to see happen. I just did not expect it at all, and I think, I speak on behalf of other people as well. But Norway, they've got great musicians. It's just a case of whether they would want to be involved in the national selection. Again, the format has been tinkered with a few times in recent years. I suppose I'd keep it the way it currently is. I think it was a case this year, was it 5 songs per heat? Or 6 songs per heat? Anyway, the last few songs in each heat were the ones that made the final. So maybe think about the running orders of those shows a little bit better. I suppose we do have an okay amount of diversity. And Norway, yes, this year was a bit of a blip on the radar, but we usually see Norway in the final, and they usually do quite well. So I'm not too concerned about 2025. In terms of prospective artists, we have Aurora, who is never going to do it in a million years. She's just released another album, I believe. She's great. She's got such an interesting look about her, such a sort of haunting and sort of ghostly voice, I would say. She's fantastic. Dagny, or Dany, D-A-G-N-Y, that's somebody who's never been involved before. Maria Mena is another one. Maria Selin, who had Freya in 2023, which surprisingly didn't make the final. Margaret Berger, she did come back with Oblivion, which was very nice. Astrid S, who's very successful. Emma Steinbacken, who's also very successful in Norway. Adeline, who's part Spanish, and she had Bombo in 2013, which was a huge hit, and then she released a couple more fairly successful singles as well, including one for the World Cup in Brazil called Olé. She lives in Australia now, I believe. Judging from her Instagram page, she does, and she's loved up as well. So whether she would even think about going into music again, I don't really know, because I think she's been a student over the past few years. I've no idea, but I'd like to see her try again. And if not for Norway, then for Spain. Girl in Red, amazing. Don't think she'd ever do it. Ulrika, it is time for the Queen to reclaim that crown that she won in 2020. She's married now. I think she was on Norway's version of the Great British Bake Off not so long ago. Was she even presenting it? I'm not entirely sure. But Ulrika, it's time to come back with another cracking ballad. Merland, who was there in 2015 with Deborah Scarlett, I'd like to see him try again. And of course, Sigrid, who is so great, and she released her second album a year or two ago. Fantastic. She also released an EP with 4 cracking songs on it, and things have gone quiet for the time being. Maybe 2025 is the year that she bursts back onto the scene and gives it a go at MGP. Arguably too famous to do it now, but really, why should that stop anybody? I would be falling off my damn chair with excitement if this woman gave it a right good go. Fantastic. So I'm going to wrap up this part 2 by talking about Poland. Poland just can't win. They have a national final, there's controversy. They have an internal selection, there's controversy. Really, I don't know what to suggest. Except, and I said this with a few other countries like Armenia, take a look at your junior Eurovision alumni. Because Vicky Gabor must be old enough now. Roxana must be old enough now. Sarah James might be old enough now. Why not give them a chance? You know, why not give them a chance? If they want to do it, if they can produce a top quality song, why not think about it? Alternatively, Margaret, who was the runner-up in the Polish selection a few years ago, admittedly, and I was gobsmacked she didn't win it. She's tried for Sweden a few times, but she's right there. She's right there, and she's a pretty big deal. So maybe just pick her as well, I don't know. The internal selection that we had this year, I didn't really pay too much attention to it, but all of the songs that were in contention were revealed, and people wanted Justina, the 1995 representative, to do it. I didn't love that song, to be honest with you. But yeah, there was controversy that she didn't win and Luna did instead, and people weren't happy. It feels like you just can't please the Polish people when it comes to Eurovision, so I don't really know what to suggest next year. I'm not fussed if it's a national final, but if you have a national final, no corrupt jury. And my God, you know, the quality just has to be so strong, because with all due respect to Blanca, that performance in the national final was pretty pants. And yes, it was better at Eurovision, but really you want to see a Eurovision-ready performance in a national final. No excuses, to be honest with you. I know countries like Moldova don't really have the resources necessarily, but with a country like Poland, come on now. So, yeah, a song in Polish, something competitive, something that feels as strong as the songs we get from Poland in Junior Eurovision half the time. Maybe it will be a former Junior Eurovision participant, or Margaret, or somebody else. I'm not too fussed. And that is it for part 2. I will be back for what will most likely be the final part, part 3, in a few days' time, continuing with Portugal and finishing with the UK. Sorry if there was any lag, sorry for rambling on and repeating myself numerous times, but let me know your thoughts on the countries I've discussed today, and until next time, take care of yourselves, stay safe, and bye for now.